Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about You, Season 3, Episode 6. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, after the last episode of kind of figuring themselves out, obviously, I love that this episode did kind of what I wanted it to do. Like, we've always gotten inside of Joe's, kind of conversations with himself. I wanted an episode with love. It's not necessarily in her head because she's technically texting 40 to do it, but it's still presented like that in some regards. I'm like, thank you for giving me this. It's probably the only episode in the season we'll get like that, but I think that's so dope to get that perspective to another extent, to finally know like what's in Love's head. It makes sense because everything is kind of supposed to be told from Joe's lens. It's supposed to be in his perspective, his eyes, his way of viewing things. And so we never got that with Beck. We never got it in season 2 because Love was the thing he was obsessed with. So, but now it's like, yeah, they're kind of in this, and they're both like dealing with things in their own right. I love that Joe's breaking into Marion's place because he's trying to prove to himself, like, why are you the one? Like, why are you? Like, why am I so like crushing on you? That's all it is. It's a crush on you. I love my wife. My wife is my soulmate. That's all there is to it. So I even love that. Like, he started going back into the old habit. He's going through everything. He's like, no, stop it. And he goes back and puts everything back that he took, put everything exactly where it was. Marion comes in. She's taking off her clothes. He's like, wait, are you teasing me or something like that? It's like, once again, just like Joe's perspective on things. But it seems like she's going to go on a date or something. And he's texting like, she's like, oh yeah, like, because I'm the, like, Love texts him something like, oh yeah, because I'm the best wife ever. Because like, he's like, oh, I'm going to be working late. And she's like, I'm going to make sure you're going to cook everything you want because I'm the best wife ever. And just makes Joe feel guilty because it's like, right, you're my wife. You're the person I love. But I just got to figure out like why you aren't the one. It's like, yeah, like everything he's doing is trying to prove to himself Marion isn't the one. Like, why are you so obsessed with her? And I love that break between of them, like Joe off on his own thing, which let's focus on Joe's situation at first. Obviously all the time he's spinning around Marion trying to figure out why she is the way she is, because obviously getting inside of her house and room gave her an idea. Because I even love that he fixed her faucet, because I was looking at me, he's like, no, this isn't like always. I've got to show my growth. I can't like fix stuff and blah blah blah. It's like, but he ends up looking into her, and I didn't put two and two together. Her ex is Ryan Goodwin. Didn't realize it was the news dude from like earlier in the series. I was like, that douchebag. And now we see like, oh, well, we saw how much of a douchebag he is into being a reporter, to the point he like broke one of the sprinklers in Matthew's house just so he can get Matthew out for an interview. But yeah, like Joe does a deeper dive into her and finds out like, oh, like there's like stuff against her, why she's kind of lost custody of her daughter. But it was before the fact, because obviously like there's been a lot of like moments between them, but at one point Joe catches her husband or ex being like kind of aggressive with her, like stuff sounds like it's about to get nasty, and Joe steps in, and in that moment, that altercation, that realization of her snapping back at him of like, I never actually get in the middle of it, made him look back on everything and put things in perspective. I was saying Fiona was the linchpin. It's like, no, his mom has always been the linchpin. I knew she was a big part of it, but I thought something with Fiona in particular, but it's like, no, Fiona was like the second person in the pattern, and he realizes like, oh my god, mother issues. It's like, how am I only now realizing like where this all stems from? Yes, it stems from my mom, because that was a big storyline. That storyline didn't like develop and get pushed into the forefront until last season, if I remember correctly. I don't think that was part of season 1. I'm pretty sure that was part of season 2. So just showing you Joe's growth and understanding how and why he ended up the way he did. But that's why he was like, yeah, that's why like I'm just so obsessed with you, because like it stems from my own mother issues. But honestly, Marion called him in because the sprinklers went off, which at first I was like, did someone do this on purpose? But it doesn't seem like it's the case. It's just, but Marion and him like connected because they both come from the system. She was in the system until she was 18. I think she says she like bounced from foster home to foster home, and she was still holding out hope that like her mom would get her one day, but never did. And it's like Joe knows exactly what that means. It's like he got his ass kicked by other kids because of it, and it still followed him up until this day. And it's like, for him, he's like, wow, that's something I haven't even talked to Love about. And it's like, yeah, like, I mean, you love her and everything, but there's only so much she could ever understand until she's like, because him and Love has her own issues, but they come from very different backgrounds. They have upbringings. Doesn't mean like, just because Love came from like her background of, a place like from a wealthy family, it doesn't change the fact is that she still came from a complicated situation in her own right, which that dives in, because this is about both of them kind of dealing with like their upbringing to an extent, just in different ways, different locations, different outcomes, similar outcomes, that different a little bit. It's really interesting. But Joe and Marion kind of hit it off, and it's just like, it's kind of, and then we kind of learned that both her and Ryan were junkies, but the problem is, like, there was a car accident, like, she was high at the time, and her daughter could have easily died, but she didn't. The other person got seriously injured. Ryan got clean before her, and plus, he's the local celebrity and stuff like that, so his words carry a lot more weight. So he's able to paint this terrible picture of Marion, putting her in this bad light, and that's why she's always kind of kept down. And so the person she was going on a date with was a lawyer, because she was trying to like get dual custody, because currently her husband has sole custody. So she wants dual custody, and she's hoping that by presenting herself and showing like, presenting like this side of herself to the judge, then that will change things, and she'll be able to have her daughter back in her life again. Because like Joe at first was like, because he was confused at first, because he was like, everything he learned about Marion, it didn't make any sense. Like all like this record about her being a terrible mom is like, it didn't make sense. But now it's like, right, you're a good mother. You're nothing like my mom. My mom abandoned me, but you want to be there for your daughter, because there's the whole conversation too that they had about, obviously it's like, because Marianne was gushing a little bit about who her daughter was, and obviously, I even love that joke that Joe made where he was like, oh yeah, my son's into Hemingway and stuff. It's like, oh, you can tell by, how he handles a bottle. I was like, oh, that's a dark joke, but it's also a dark literary joke while also being a real life joke, just because like, if you're unaware, like Hemingway being one of the people we reference had his struggles with alcohol. So it's like, I was like, God, that's kind of it's just, I'm focusing on it too much, but I'm like, that's such a dark, interesting literary joke, even though it's not technically a literary joke. It's only a literary joke because we're talking about an author. I can't say that word. I always say Arthur, like the show Arthur. I always say it like that, but it's author. It's one of those daughter thing. I say daughter like it's actually like daughter, but it sounds weird. I'm down to get in my tangent back, escaping my diatribe. Let's kind of go back to it, but I just thought that was interesting. And the rain happens to, like the sprinkler happens to fall on them when they're about to have a moment, but then it stopped that moment, got some kissing involved, and it's like, oh. So initially it's like, right, we gotta get away from this situation, because now I love the words that woke in Joe's mind. Love is going to kill you. And it's like, right, we can't let that Natalie situation happen again, so I got to protect you, Marion. So he came in the next day being like, I'm going to quit. But she's like, at first, it's like, I'm not trying, like, she's like, all right, Joe, I'll admit it, I have feelings for you. And like, Joe's probably like, wait, I wasn't expecting this to happen. But for her, it's like, I'm not about to ruin a family. And she's like, I won't do anything to split up you, your wife, and you have like the most adorable baby, Henry. And he's like, I won't do anything that will prevent you from getting your child back. And both of them understand that. It's like, right, I know you would never do anything to hurt my situation, and I know you would never do anything hurt my, like, they both know that about each other. But in that moment, it's like, oh, you don't have to quit just to do all that. But it's like, they find themselves like just attracted to each other. And, Marion's just like, we need, a clear head, to kind of figure this all out. And it's like, ooh, boy, this is complicated. So all the while that's happening, you have Love, like I said, texting 40, kind of opening up the fact is that she's not happy with her life. And I like I said, I like that we finally get that insight into another character besides Joe. It's so interesting. Granted, like, it's coming from the perspective of, yeah, she is, like, legitimately texting. Because at one point, like, Sherry and Dottie apparently hit it off. And it's like, honestly, that's a match made in heaven. That comes as no surprise. But at one point, Love was like, ugh, vomit emoji. And it's like, yeah, it's because she probably legitimate while she was texting 40, texted, like, a vomit emoji. But obviously the whole situation about her not being happy, because she's also worried, because it turns out, hey, I might be pregnant. It's like, that's kind of worrying, because it's like, well, if that's the case, it could be Joe's baby, or it could be Theo's, which her mom immediately being like, oh, why aren't you drinking? Are you pregnant? And she was like, no, I'm just going on a mini cleanse. I'm like, oh, is it the kid's baby or is it Joe's? And it's like, her mom just, it's like, for her, it's almost like, that's what my mom do. She like nitpicks. She's able, that's why she was like, got to keep it calm, because she knew her mom would be able to sniff it out. she admittedly does. Especially because Theo, like, came outside earlier, like, in the episode, and, like, because she won't respond to him, and so, like, he came out with music playing on a stereo, and he's like, yeah, I know that rom-coms from, like, when you grew up, this is how, like, you got a girl's attention or something like that, which she's like, first of all, I'm not that old. It's like, yeah, I love that that's, like, the reference, because he's a Gen Zer. I'd assume, like, Love is a millennial, so it's kind of like, you're acting like I'm Gen X or something. It's like, no, I'm not that old. I'm a millennial. Because I'd assume Victoria, the actress who plays Love, is probably in, like, early 30s. I haven't looked into it. Not either early 30s, late 20s, I'd assume. But regardless, I just, and I'd assume Love would be about that same age. But, yeah, Theo's like, yeah, his dad's back, but his dad's just so caught up in everything. It's like, he was supposed to be in Tokyo or whatever for, like, a month, but he came back early, and he's dealing with it. And Theo's like, oh, we could just do this. Like, he's still trying to bridge that gap between him and his stepdad. But, because he's trying to be there for him, considering, like, he knows Matthew's going through a lot because of this whole Natalie thing. He wants to help him. He wants to connect. It's like, I know he's not the most, but it's like, I want to be there to shoulder and help him through some of it. And even Love, it's like, yeah, you just want to be there for him. I get it. And I love, just, you got to be there for him. Like, even if he, he might not be the nicest person, but just be there for your dad. Also, it's like, one more question. Will you answer it for me? Do you think about me when you're having sex with your husband? Because you're like, oh, do you make that face? She's just like, go. I love that we do cut to them later on having sex. He's thinking about, Marianne, and she's thinking about Theo, and was like, wow, this is crazy. And it's like, oh, that was great. Yeah, that was great. And it's like, oh, that's awkward for the audience, knowing, like, oh, but you were both thinking about each other. Which, I mean, like, I think you're allowed, because nothing had, well, she at that time had slept with Theo. I guess, well, her and Theo have kissed multiple times, because they did make out and did have sex. But also, like, all Joe's done is make out with Marianne. They haven't even had sex, but they've made out twice. So we're kind of evening the playing field, I guess. And, like, if they have sex, it's almost even killed her. It's not like, it's supposed, because Joe doesn't know that she already slept with Theo, that she was even worried about being pregnant. That's a whole thing. But she goes to, like, that vineyard and everything, and there's an author there talking about, like, happiness and stuff like that, which I love that, like, Sherry and Dottie are eating up along with everyone else, but then Love's just trying to figure it out, like, right, like, if I'm not happy, like, what's going on there? Because her previous thing, and it still kind of applies in this case, is she's kind of blaming Joe for being, like, the reason, because she's like, I'm kind of, like, because she's trying to figure out, like, why is she unhappy? She's like, I should be happy, but I'm just not. And, especially because she went off on her mom being like, yeah, like, you're the reason me and 40 are so effed up. And she's like, you don't blame me. Like, the only one you got to look at is, like, you, because you're self-sabotaging your life. Yes, I made you spoiled, but it's like her mom, because Dottie kind of was like, yeah, she was blunt with her last episode. Dottie went 0 to 60 and was like, blam, 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 blam. And then you just could tell, like, obviously, and I just love later on, like, Love is drinking after she figures out, oh, I'm not pregnant. She's just like, fuck Dottie. I don't need, like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And she's, like, texting, and then, like, there's some emojis that pop up. And I guess I should have paid attention at the time, but I think she was like, wait, 40, are you texting me back? And lo and behold, she hallucinates and sees 40 there with her. And is like, yeah. And she talks about Joe and everything. It's just like, yeah, I thought I loved Joe. I thought, because everything, it's kind of like it's kind of like Joe believing, like, what he thought the happily ever after was going to be. It seems like Love kind of bought into that a little bit too, because she thought, like, oh, I get married, I have a kid. Like, she thought she knew what it was going, like, she was kind of doing what she thought she needed to do. And it's just like, she thought, she loved Joe, that he was her soulmate, but it's like, I don't even like him. But then 40's like, well, of course he's not your soulmate. I'm your soulmate. It's like that person who knows what all you've been through, just like he's connecting with Marion on a way that he can't connect with Love. Love is connected with 40 on a way, because it's like 40, like it is that thing too of, like, they're twins. There's a deeper connection there that no other relationship will ever be able to compare to. So it's like, this is the person that's been through the trenches with me. He's like, yeah, I remember being on those mattresses with you. The mattresses, like, Dottie was going in on about, like, and it's like, right, I couldn't stand those that pee was killing me too, or whatever. And so it's kind of a situation where it's like she's like, I'm self-sabotaging, aren't I? Because it's the thing of, like, she just couldn't figure out why she But it was almost beautiful too, because I think it was a necessary thing for her where she realizes like 40's like, you don't have to worry about it. I am here with you. I always am. Like, we'll always have that connection. Because for her, because she even said at one point, it's like, oh, maybe you should have just eaten me in the womb. But he talks about, you are always going to be the one that survived. That's why you latched on to me so tightly, because you figured the world would eat me, that I wouldn't make it. You'd be strong enough to survive, but you knew I wouldn't be. So that's why, like, Love was very overprotective, why she, like, held on so tight, until the point, like, things played out the way they did. But, you know, and I love that. Like, obviously she's sleeping in, like, 40 singing to her, and it's just like, you know, I'll be there. So she talks to Sherry. Yo, might be one of the best Sherry moments, because before now it's always like, oh, Sherry's kind of a D-bag, isn't she? But it's like, nah, in this moment, Sherry, like, got real deep and stuff, and it's like, saying that it, you know, having twins herself, it's like, there's nothing that's ever going to compare to that. But she talks about, like, the fact is that her and Carrie, they couldn't be the furthest thing apart, and she's like, actually, there's a lot of stuff about him I didn't like, but she kind of talked about making it work. And it's like, you know, Love talks about like, oh, it's that easy, and she's like, no, it's hard work, you know, but it's about like, you know, it's like, yes, you may have like one soulmate or whatever. Well, because for her, no, it's like, for her, she was like, yeah, soulmates, that whole thing is like BS. You choose who you want to have as your life partner. And that's the whole conversation she's trying to have about, you need to pick that person that you're, that you get to choose. Like, you know, it's like, because her and Carrie, like, they found a way past a lot of their issues, and it's just like, yeah, she ended up choosing him, so it's like, kind of do the same thing. And I think that puts things in perspective, because she was so caught up in, like, the notion of a soulmate and everything, which Joe's kind of seeing like, oh, Love's not my soulmate, and she's kind of realizing Joe's not hers. I think we all do kind of get so caught up in the belief that, like, there is only one person for us. It's once a conversation I think I had in earlier episodes about, like, yeah, there are people that come in your life for a season, but there's no, like, just that one person. There's always going to be people in, like, that's what it comes down to. There's no such thing as soulmates. There's just people. I thought that was his show, wasn't it? I believe so, yeah. I'm blurring, because I'm watching so many shows, so, like, I never know, like, is that from this or that from that? Like, I'm always blurring stuff together. But, especially because I'm, like, watching so much stuff in between, like, the previous, like, episodes 1, 3, and 4. Like, I watched so much in between all of them that is, like, 5 and 6 are, like, I'm watching these back to back, which I just haven't with the others. It's just been so interspertant. I'm not about to get into it. It's a whole thing. But it was just interesting, the advice Sherry gave. I was like, oh, like, this is you, because it was real. It was like, for her, she kind of put all the momfluencer stuff behind it. Just like, I feel like in that moment we got to see the real Sherry. She got to be real for an instant, and so I thought that was pretty dope. Love decided she had to say goodbye to 40. It's like, yes, I love you and you'll always be my soulmate, but I've got to let you go. I've got to choose Joe, because there's no way I can, like, take care of a family if I'm taking care of that family with a broken heart. So she's got to say goodbye to 40. Theo shows up because he's like, yo, you called me like 4 a.m. It's like, right. So I'm assuming the text she saw from 40 with the celebration, either that was her in her drunken stage, or that was part of, like, the whole Theo thing. I think, because he said, like, you called me, so. But Theo ended up discovering, because we find out that Matthew is investigating everyone in the neighborhood, to the point that one of his people, like, the lady that kind of works with him, that kind of, like, oversees a lot of stuff, she had to put out a lot of fires because his name and the company was associated with affairs and murder. So she doesn't want to have to be putting out fires for the next, like, few months again or something like that, or a few weeks or whatever again. But Matthew is getting a PI to look into everyone because he thinks there's more to Natalie's case. And so now it turns into the moment that came up, I was like, probably not a good idea for Joe to be stalking people right now, because everyone's getting, like, bird's eye views on everybody. And that PI could be following Joe as he's following Marianne. So that could be a whole issue in its own right. But, yeah, everyone's getting investigated, and Theo found that information because he came to check in on his dad, and he sees it. It's like, his dad's... It's not a crime board with the red string and everything, but it might as well be. It's just a digital version of it. Him got everyone pulled up, and she's like... And he comes to her like, yeah, so I got to tell you about the thing I found out about my dad. He's kind of investigating everyone, and then there's, like, you and Joe, so Love has to bring that up to Joe, which Joe at first was like, oh my god, she knows about the whole Marion thing? How could she know? And it's like, right. So... Matthew's investigating everyone, including us, and it's like, what does he know? It's like, well, we don't know. She's like, but I can't use Theo to an advantage. I mean, he's a 19-year-old, so they'll go along with everything if they think it will lead to sex. But we already know he has a crush on me, so she's like, I have to pretend like something will happen. He's like, no, go for it. Because he's like, while you're so distracted with this, you won't notice I'm over here, like, you know, with the whole Marion thing. So for him, it's like, yeah, this will work out. You might not be my soulmate, but I do love you, and he's going to make this work out as he continues to stalk Marion, while also, like, you know, Love has her own project that'll keep her at bay. Once again, slippery slope, especially with eyes on you. Like, she's going to be pretending to get close to Theo, but, you know, that's going to start turning into some issues, especially because he does remind her so much of her brother. So that's going to turn into a slippery slope. Joe's already got his slippery slope with Marion, so... Dude, this is going to be wild. Side note, I even love that, like, when she texted 40 for the last time, she's like, goodbye, you. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of, like, once again, they do that on purpose. It's like, the parallels between her and Joe this episode. I really like that. Like I said, because she's saying goodbye to 40, we'll never get that again, or even for the rest of the season. But I love that so much. I wish it was a continuous thing, but, you know, sadly not. So, but I'm really excited to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.